We have a rare weather pattern that is about to form, everybody, and I want to walk you through every piece of it before we get into today's storms. A big blocking pattern is setting up, and it is going to stretch all the way toward Alaska on one side of the country and all the way toward the northern Atlantic on the other side. When you get blocking in both of those places at the same time, that is what allows a good bit of cold air to come pouring down into the central and eastern United States. Now, at the same time this is happening, this same pattern is going to build a heat ridge along the west and across the south central states. But stick with me here, because the cold front tied to this blocking setup could push all the way down toward the Gulf, potentially, as we move toward the end of August and especially into the beginning of September. So if you have been asking me when your relief from this heat is finally coming, all of that information is in this video, so stay with me through it. Before we get into that longer range pattern, I do want to mention we still have a threat for severe weather today and again tomorrow. But just like I told you yesterday, this was not looking like a tornado threat, and it still is not looking like one today or tomorrow. What this is bringing is wind, and we will go through all of that as well, including where it is happening and how strong it could get. Hey, happy Tuesday, everybody. Mark here again at Weatherman Plus, and I have some brand new information, some new data that just came in that is confirming we do have a blocking pattern on the way, and it is going to bring cold air further south than what we have seen in a while. So make sure you hit that share button and get this out to other people, because I know a lot of folks are exhausted from this heat, and they need to hear that relief really is right around the corner. Let's start with the latest data, because this is where the confidence in this forecast is really building. When we look at our North Atlantic Oscillation, or the NAO, you can see we are trending toward that negative phase as we go through the 24th and beyond. And this negative trend potentially holds all the way toward the very beginning of September. When the NAO goes negative like this, it is a signal that we are getting a big blocking pattern building in the Atlantic. Now, one thing I want you to note here, because it matters for how deep this cold gets, is the difference between the European model, which I will call the Euro, shown in blue, and the American GFS model, shown in red. The GFS is trending toward a deeper, stronger blocking setup than the Euro is showing right now. At the same time, when you look at your APO, your East Pacific Oscillation, you can see the exact same story playing out. As we move from the 24th all the way into the start of September, that index is also trending strongly negative. And when you get a negative EPO, that is what builds a big blocking pattern all the way up toward Alaska. Once again, look at the difference between the Euro and the GFS here. They are actually pretty close to each other on this one. The real disagreement between the two models is not whether this blocking happens, it is what happens once we get into September. Is it going to trend warmer or is it going to trend colder? And when I look at the overall trend across these models, the more believable signal right now, especially in that central pattern, is that it is not going to warm back up. It is actually going to trend colder. So the real question left on the table is simply, how much colder are we talking? To answer that, I want to bring in the Arctic Oscillation, or the AO, because this index tells you what the cold air itself is doing. And when you track this through the pattern change, you can see there is a dip of cooler air that sticks around all the way toward the end of August as this transition happens. Now, we already have a little bit of cooler air working through the pattern as it is right now, but what is coming behind it is going to be noticeably colder and noticeably deeper than what we have felt so far. The question of whether that cold air holds on all the way into September is one I'm still watching closely. Right now, the trend in the data says, yes, it is possible, but I will be honest with you. The model data is still too spread out to know exactly how that plays out that far in advance. I will keep you updated as this comes into better focus, so make sure you are subscribed and following along, because it is weather, and weather does move around a little bit as we get closer. So here is the simple version of what you are looking at. When you get that negative EPO, you get a blocking pattern that sets up all the way toward Alaska. When you get that negative NAO, you get a blocking pattern that sets up all the way toward Greenland and the northern Atlantic. And when both of those block at the same time, that combination is what allows all of this cooler air to slide further south and further east into the country. The stronger that blocking pattern gets, the stronger, and the deeper that cold front is going to push. And at the very same time this cold is diving south, it is going to push warmer air up into the western US, so not everyone is going to be feeling the same story out of this pattern. Now, as we move through the rest of this week, we are still going to see some cooler air working through in spots, but I want to be clear with you, it is going to get reinforced with heat again every single day behind it. So you might see the 70s one day, and then you are right back into the 90s the next. But as we move into next week is when that bigger, more significant cold front finally arrives. You can see this clearly when you look at the latest weather model runs. showing that by the 25th and the 26th, you get a strong area of high pressure blocking all the way up toward the north and another area of high pressure blocking all the way up toward Alaska. And remember, these cold fronts are essentially riding in on the back of a big area of high pressure. That is the mechanism that lets this cooler air dig further into the country because of that blocking pattern holding everything in place. Now, there is still a tropical wave that the models are showing trying to work its way around this area of high pressure and out into the Atlantic. But this is well past the 10-day window, so the confidence on that is low. And honestly, the model consensus is not even bringing it that close to development right now. And if it does try to organize out there, that cold front associated with this blocking pattern is going to bring a lot of shear with it, and that shear would likely push any development further to the east and away from land. But getting back to the main story here, this cold front is showing up strong for next week. And it looks like it is going to stick around longer as we move further into the beginning of September. This is a real, significant cold front coming through, and it is directly tied to that blocking pattern we have been talking about. As you move through the rest of this week, we're still going to see those cooler temperatures working through the Midwest, the Great Lakes, out through the Ohio Valley, and into the Northeast. And in some of those spots, you could see temperatures run anywhere from 10 to as much as 15 degrees below average, even while that heat is still building out across the west and the south. But once we move into next week, this is where that blocking pattern really delivers, and that big cool front comes shooting south. We are talking everybody all the way from the upper Midwest, potentially down toward the Gulf, as we get deeper into this blocking setup. When you look at the temperature, departure maps for this, you can see areas running anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees below average, shown in the green and the white shading, but there is a good bit of purple on this map too, and that purple is showing temperature departures of 20 degrees below average. So if you have been hoping for this cool front to finally break through, because let's be honest, this heat has been unbearable for a lot of people, this is the time frame you want to circle, showing up toward the end of August and into the beginning of September. Now let's talk about what happened with our storms yesterday, because once again, there was no tornado threat that materialized, but we did get a real wind threat out of it. We had more than 160 reports of wind damage come in, along with a lot of strong wind gusts across the central and north central states. And unfortunately, we are still dealing with a good number of power outages from that. Indiana is still sitting at roughly 97,000 homes without power. West Virginia is around 11,000. Arkansas is at about 16,000. And Hawaii, dealing with its own separate situation, is sitting at around 72,000 without power. So let's look at today. For our severe weather setup today, we do have a tornado threat listed at 82% coverage, but I want to be clear with you again, I am still not viewing this as a major tornado threat. This is shaping up to be primarily a wind threat. In fact, the wind forecast has actually been upgraded, now showing chances for gusts up to 75 miles per hour in the areas shown with black hatching on the outlook. Along with that wind threat, we also have a hail threat in play today, and in the more significant severe zones, we could see hail growing from around 1 inch in diameter in the yellow shaded areas up to 2 inches in the areas marked in black. When you look at how today unfolds, we are going to see storms building up out over Montana and Wyoming, and also over Wisconsin, which then pushes across into Michigan. And that is going to bring a threat for some strong, gusty winds along with it. From there, that activity moves into Nebraska and South Dakota later this evening, and then overnight we could see some strong winds developing from Kansas into Missouri as we head into the early morning hours. Then as we move into tomorrow, that activity shifts across into Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. As for the tornado threat specifically for today, I am still not showing a significant setup. If we do end up with a tornado, my expectation is that it would be a quick, brief spin-up rather than a long-track event, because the latest model runs are not showing a lot of organized supercell activity developing. Looking hour by hour, we could see some strong winds moving through eastern Kansas around 11 p.m., and then some strong storms developing over Michigan in the early morning hours, spreading across Missouri and Illinois as well. Then, for tomorrow, we will see additional storms building up over Ohio and northern Missouri, and separately, we are also watching Florida, along with some strong storms expected to fire up over the Four Corners region. So for tomorrow, for Wednesday, the tornado threat drops down to just 2%, which again is a low threat level. This is still primarily going to be a wind event, so I want you watching for that high wind threat across the outlined cities and states, rather than worrying about tornadoes. Now, when I look at the latest high-resolution model, breaking things down into 15-minute increments, it actually paints a clearer picture of how this evening and overnight period unfolds. You will see some storms fire up over Montana and Wyoming, along with some minor storm activity across Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. But the stronger storms are going to be over Wisconsin, pushing into Michigan as we go through the night. From there, activity spreads into South Dakota and Nebraska, and then into the early morning hours, it starts transitioning across the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, and also into Missouri. These storms are capable of producing some strong wind gusts, with the model showing chances for 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts, shown in that orange to red shading, stretching from Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, western South Dakota, and western Nebraska, and also from Wisconsin into Michigan. There's also storm activity forming up over Alabama that could bring some gusty winds as we move through the evening, so keep that on your radar as well. I do expect to see some unusual hit or miss weather popping up across the southeast because of an upper level low that has been hanging around. And I mentioned this same setup yesterday, and it ended up verifying exactly as expected. When you look at today's tornado outlook from the National Weather Service, they are also not showing this as a tornado threat, instead calling for a wind threat and a hail threat, which lines up with what I have been telling you. Looking ahead to tomorrow, the National Weather Service is again not calling for a tornado threat, but they are still watching for severe weather potential as we head into Thursday. And I will keep you posted on that because these things do shift around. When you look at the Colorado State outlook, they are showing that the main focus is across the southern and southeastern portion of the country, and that this could actually strengthen a bit, so I am watching that closely as well. But stepping back to the bigger picture here, this whole pattern is unfortunately still bringing a lot of heat to a lot of people who are more than ready to be done with it. When you look at the latest extended outlooks, running from around the 25th through the 28th, right as this pattern is bringing that cold front through, you can see there is still a lot of extreme heat that is going to persist in some areas, and this heat could actually linger all the way toward the end of the month in certain spots. But layered right over that is this big cooler anomaly that is coming through as well, so both signals are present in the data at the same time, depending on where you live. So let's talk actual numbers for today. Now, across the central and northern US, you are looking at highs generally in the 70s and 80s, but for the central and southern US, temperatures are going to run well over 100 degrees. And across the southeast, you are looking at the high 90s, even touching 100 in spots. Out across the southwest, temperatures are still sitting over 110, even 115 degrees in the hottest locations. And remember, on top of the air temperature itself, we still have strong heat index values today, meaning it is going to feel even hotter than the thermometer says. As we move through tonight into the early morning hours, you will start to see the first cold front working through, bringing in some cooler air. But I want to stress this again, this is only the first cold front in the sequence, and it is going to get reinforced with heat again each and every day behind it. This back and forth pattern, cold front, brief relief, heat rebuilding, is going to be the story we are stuck in all the way until next Tuesday. We keep getting these fronts moving through, followed by warmer temperatures, bouncing right back each time. But once we get to next Tuesday and Wednesday, right around the 25th and the 26th, that is when this bigger, cooler anomaly finally moves in for real. And I am talking Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of that week, getting notably deeper and colder, possibly even dropping into the 40s in some spots. I'm not saying that lightly either, because when I compare that projection against the CFS, our longer range climate model, it is not showing quite that deep of a drop, but it is still clearly picking up on those same cooler temperatures. And remember, the GFS is the model showing that stronger blocking pattern, which is exactly what would allow colder air to dig further into the country. So I will absolutely keep you updated as we get closer and this becomes clearer. Looking at Saturday specifically, when you check the Euro model, you can see it bringing temperatures into the 60s and even the 50s in some areas, but it is just not showing the cold air digging quite as deep as the GFS wants to take it. So remember the core difference between these two models, everybody. The Euro is not showing a big blocking pattern developing. The overall trend across the data is leaning toward the idea that we will get that blocking pattern. And the GFS is the one committing hardest to a strong blocking setup. I will keep tracking both of these closely for you. Honestly, I am hoping, and I will admit I am rooting for these temperatures to dig even further south, so that all of you can actually feel some real fall-like temperatures. The extended data is showing that cooler anomaly holding on all the way toward the 30th of the month. When you compare that to the CFS, it is seeing that same general cooling signal, just not quite as pronounced. but it is still showing this cooler pattern holding through toward the end of the month, and that is the 30th specifically on the CFS output, while the GFS actually pulls that cold air even further south by that point. So how far south this ultimately goes really depends on whether storms form up and help pull that colder air down with them, and how quickly things try to warm back up behind it. A lot of areas are going to be sitting in the 50s and 60s during the coolest stretch, while other areas that have been living in the 90s and 100s will drop into the 70s, and areas that have been baking in the 100s to 105 will fall back into the 80s. That said, it is still going to stay hot across the southwest through this whole stretch. And as we move into the first third of September, the data is showing this cold front pushing in even deeper across the country. So now you know everything that I am seeing and everything that I am watching closely right now. As part of all of this, I'm also keeping an eye on chances for tropical formation, because we are still right in the middle of hurricane season, which is exactly what I have been forecasting and tracking for you all along. This is the kind of setup where you can get fronts and disturbed weather trying to organize into something that starts out non-tropical and attempts to transition into something tropical. Just so you understand the difference, non-tropical means the thunderstorm activity is not wrapped around a defined center, while tropical means that thunderstorm activity is organized around the center, and that is when a system can intensify further if it moves over warmer water. I will absolutely keep you updated on that as it develops, so please make sure you are subscribed and following along, because that is how you get accurate, honest forecasting from me as this all plays out. But overall, I do believe we could be looking at this rare blocking pattern setting up, one that allows this colder air to dig even deeper into the country, so keep watching for that in the days ahead. Thank you all so much for your time today, and I hope you have a truly blessed day. Please make sure you share this with other people so they know that relief really is on the way. And before I go, I want to leave you with a quick word today. Get ready, because a real change is coming to this pattern, and exactly how deep it goes is something I will keep you updated on every step of the way.